Hi, thanks for tuning into the LabVIEW Experiment podcast. We'd like to learn more about you, our audience, so we've put together a little survey. As a reward for filling out the survey, we're going to give away a few Visa gift cards. So use the link below to fill out the survey and get entered to win a gift card. Welcome to the LabVIEW Experiment. I'm your host, Sam Taggart from SAS Workshops. If you're a developer looking to unlock your potential and take your skills to the next level, then look no further. From freeing your imagination and experimenting with new ideas and workflows, to exploring aspects of software development you've never even considered before, I'm going to help you grow your craft so you can approach your work like an artist and have more fun with what you do. In my 15 years working with and training developers, I've helped dozens of individuals and organizations embrace a growth and learning mindset that allows us to overcome challenges and embrace failure as the essential learning experience it is. If you're ready for the philosophies, strategies, tips, and tricks that will unlock your creativity, then it's time to get to work. Howdy. So, welcome to the LabVIEW Experiment podcast. I'm Sam Taggart, the host, and I'm here just after G DevCon NA. Actually, it's second day. Second day. So yesterday was the last day. Today's the first day after.
If there was a fourth day, it would be the fourth day.
Yeah, something like that. With Derrick Bommarito,
Howdy.
who happens to work at the moment at NI, right?
Yep.
He does have his little plug. Yeah, cool.
Senior technical support engineer at NI right now.
Yeah, you work with Norm and Darren, and right. So if somebody calls tech support, they get escalated. Eventually, they end up at your desk.
If it's a LabVIEW or test stand question, very high chance I see it.
Very cool. So I've only really heard about you the past couple of years. Like I heard your name thrown around and stuff. But so can you tell me a little bit about your background before you ended up at NI?
Yeah, so I've definitely flew under the radar with some smaller systems integrators, alliance partners. Started off at a systems integrator, doing everything from medical device testing, oil and gas, high pressure testing. Trying to remember which companies I did which projects at. Then I was at another company. We did hardware in the loop testing for aircraft chassis and flight computers, more medical device stuff. Then I worked for an oil and gas company, managing their high pressure test systems for doing completion tools, engineering validation stuff. And now I'm at NI.
Cool. So it sounds like a whirlwind tour.
Oh yeah. Yeah. A little bit of everything. Not too much experience in any single industry except for the oil and gas industry, but lots of experience writing lots of LabVIEW code.
Yeah, well, when I think of you, I think of a little bit of everything because every time I see you post something on your GitHub or something, it's a completely different thing.
I like trying lots of stuff. I like trying all the things that people say or just ask, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
I get a kick out of it.
So cool. So since the name of the podcast, LabVIEW Experiment, can you think of an experiment where you tried it and it just went horribly wrong and what did you learn from that?
I'm actually in the middle of a project right now that has a bug fix. It's a bug fix in LabVIEW 2022 that's going to be coming out. That'll let me do what I was trying to do. So I had gotten really far down this project that's involving a pretty large X node. Well, the X node itself isn't that large when you see it, but there's a lot of code in the background. And I've also been experimenting with channel wires and making my own channel templates and just more flexible options for how to pass data around applications. And got a lot of it, I got to the 90% mark of the X node. I got the channel implementation done. And then it just turns out you couldn't use channels with X nodes.
So is this part of the 7x7 thing you did? Because that looked really interesting.
That is the channel template that was part of this project. But the channel template can be used on its own outside of this other thing I'm working on as well.
So for your 7x7 thing, is that code that you're actually using in a project then? Or is that
I use it for demo stuff, and I will be using it more once I finish this other bit. I've demoed, if you've seen some of my tweets where I was doing some of the modular synthesizer stuff in LabVIEW, it uses that channel implementation.
So it's something that you would recommend, they have no qualms about people using in their own
it's on VIPM. I've done a bunch of performance testing on it. It's solid. It's not as performant as some of the other high bandwidth channel implementations or just using a queue by itself, but you get the flexibility in how you can lay out your block diagrams, which is nice. it's not inefficient. It uses less CPU, but it has less data bandwidth. So if it fits, it's a good way to play around with prototyping ideas a little bit more flexibly. But yeah, if people can give it a shot. And if they do find issues, I'll work on them.
Yeah, cool. So what's the most interesting use case you found for that so far?
Well, it's a fun project, but the modular synthesizer, actually started it as an idea. I started that channel template as an idea from Norm, who does software-defined radio stuff. And so that one, with software-defined radio, you have sinks and sources and processing steps. And a lot of times you're trying to crunch a lot of data. So you need to do a lot of operations in parallel. So you want to be able to, you want to be able to test different processing pipelines and adding in different steps. Maybe I want to throw a graph in the middle and see what the data looks like in the middle. And this just lets you tack stuff on and change from lossy readers, lossless readers, event-based readers. So it's flexible, and it's great for things like software-defined radio pipelines, any other kind of DSP pipelines. And then I'm using it for doing software modular synthesizers on the block diagram, just because I'm definitely not a musician, but I like tinkering when I can.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people fall in that category. I fall in that category too.
I wish I was a musician. I wish I could make something that like an entire song, but I can make cool little snippets.
Oh, well, that's cool. Yeah, well, cool little snippets work for stuff like podcasts and right, like little intro, outro music.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't have to be a full song.
But yeah, so ended up getting pretty far along in this, and then just hit a brick wall. Just channel there's an aspect of how X nodes set themselves up so you can wire things to them from the calling block diagram, and that is incompatible with channel wires. Then the product owners for LabVIEW and the people that manage the bugs and things are like, this isn't something anybody would ever reasonably be expected to want to do. We're never going to work on it. But turns out, asked around, a couple of people were like, you're using channel wires, you should probably dock to Jeff K. So Jeff K was interested in it, liked the idea, and spent some time figuring out what the issue was and updated X nodes a little bit. Cool. And it'll be in 2022. So I don't know if I'll talk about it at next G DevCon, but you'll definitely be seeing stuff about it online as I get to play with it more.
So if it wasn't for Jeff K, then it probably wouldn't have ever got attention.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because your use case was so obscure that there's like, yeah.
Yeah, I did have an alternative using Express VIs, and I got a pretty good prototype done with that. But the X nodes just will provide some other functionality that makes it really similar to working with things like GNU Radio Companion, which is what Norm with his whole SDR thing is super interested in, and just really making it, lowering the barrier for people that are used to those kinds of, this data source, this data sync, I need to wire them together. I don't care what the data type is. I don't care what the mechanism is. I just know this supplies some data, this needs some data. Maybe it's lossy, maybe it's lossless. You can just, for the most part, not worry about that when you're using things that already exist, and just give you the flexibility to experiment and play more.
Yeah, that could be really useful for like producer-consumer, or not producer-consumer.
It works for that.
But like the observer pattern or something where like this thing's broadcasting data and you can observe it. And as the observer, you get to decide whether you want the latest data or not, right?
Right.
So that's basically what it is.
Yep.
It's in some manner. Cool. So you mentioned Jeff K. We should note that Jeff K. is officially retiring.
Yeah. That's going to be an interesting change. I'm curious / excited / nervous to see what that brings to the LabVIEW world.
Yeah, I'm super excited for him. I think it's it's a long
well
time coming.
Earned.
Yeah, exactly. Jeff has done some amazing stuff. He's a great visionary. Yeah, I do kind of worry slightly about NI because he was a great visionary and he's going to pick up that vision. And I mean, he says he's still going to be involved, so that's really good.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I would like to try to have him speak at G DevCon NA or something. I bet he would if we invited him.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this, Jeff, you're invited. So
give him a year, maybe 2.
Yeah. Let him relax. Let him spend some time on the beach or whatever it is he wants to go.
I would, if I was in his shoes, maybe not exactly his shoes, maybe a small portion of his shoes. I would definitely leveraged the ability to suddenly just go around for a year and
no, he definitely needs a break and stuff. But I don't know him very well, but I imagine he's not the kind of person to just like say I'm done and sit on a beach and he'll come up with other stuff to do. And
I've still never actually met him in person. I've seen him give his keynotes at NI Week and NI Connect. Well, no, he didn't give a keynote at NI Connect. I've seen him give the keynotes at NI Week, and that's about as much as I've actually seen him in person.
I met him once, I think, at one of the things. He may have even sat next to me at dinner, but I don't remember talking to him a whole lot. I think I was kind of still in awe. But I have to say that everybody I've talked to who's met him, like, they speak very highly of him. I mean, he's very, like, from what I understand, he's very down to earth and, like, very easy to talk to. And so,
Yeah. I was interacting with him over, our Teams channels and chats and stuff. But yeah, have yet to actually meet him in person. So maybe we can get him to G DevCon so I can thank him in person for his bug fix.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah, that'd be very cool. Yeah, and I did not have a huge presence here this year like they did last year. Last year they sent a bunch of people, and this year a handful. But
yeah, I think it's probably the case with everybody. Things are a little bit tighter this year.
Yeah.
NI's finally feeling, well, they have been for a little bit, but feeling the effects of the component shortage and all of that. And so and then people like Norm get themselves very busy.
Norm was supposed to be here and then he got called away or something at the last minute. I don't know all the details, but that's what happens when you're really good at what you do, right? You get busy. So
or if you're like me and you just like trying to get your grubby little fingers into everything.
It's a shame Norm is not here though, because Norm is an amazing presenter.
Yes.
Yeah, his 7x7 on like RF in 7 minutes or something. Like everybody should go watch that. Yeah, it was at one of the CLA summits. Like Norm and Darren are both like, I love watching them present because
I aspire to be able to present half as good as Darren does.
It's the combination of they're really smart and intelligent. They know a lot about whatever it is they're talking about. So they have very good practical information. They're able to take all that theory stuff and distill it down to practice. Like, here's some very good advice. And they're very, very personable, lots of like emotional intelligence and like able to relate to people and just very, very like bubbly and outgoing. And yeah.
And it also helps that they're pretty good comics.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is sometimes like you go to different user group meetings and even NI Week and stuff. And sometimes people get up on, and they're just kind of clueless that there's even an audience there. Like I remember going to one online meeting group, virtual user group during the pandemic. And the guy's giving this presentation, like nobody was paying attention. Everybody was falling asleep. And he was just like droning on. And he was like, and I was just like,
that happened to mine a little bit.
Like, yeah, I mean,
I think I saw Darren nodding off.
No, you were fine. Yeah. No, luckily at G DevCon NA, we haven't really had any issues. Like everybody who's presented like this year and last year, like, yes, obviously Norm and Darren are like the stars of like super charismatic, but everybody did really well. And like, yeah.
Yeah, so it is fun. I love getting to show off what I'm working on and just throw some more ideas out into the world. If what I'm doing isn't directly useful, like there's going to be parts of it that people maybe haven't seen before, or just parts of it that'll be useful.
Yeah.
And then of course getting to see what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
A lot of impressive work being done for tooling around Active Framework and DQMH. I might finally have to get into DQMH or Active Framework.
Yeah, I have to say, like, I've played around with Active Framework and I've done some projects in it, but like a lot of the pain points that came up with Casey's presentation are all the reasons that I was kind of avoiding it and had drifted towards DQMH. But Casey's tool does remove, or at least mitigate, many of those pain points. So
I think it would drastically speed up when you have to go between the different components and find the messages and work on filling in all the details.
I had an Active Framework project here recently. I was doing all that tracing, and it's just like, really, I gotta go 5 clicks to see what's going on. And but as Alan mentioned, and I think Casey mentioned in his presentation, like there is a good reason for moving some of that stuff out of there. Like, right, you get the modularity by being able to put stuff in different classes and things, but that doesn't let you put it on the same block diagram. And I think that goes back to Steve Watts is always talking about immediacy and like how quickly you can make a change and see what's going on. And it's all just right there.
Yeah.
And it's a balancing act.
So
I
as
think.
much as channel wires get a bad rap, that's definitely the thing they're good at. If you can compose your code in minimal layers. Channel wires just let you immediately see the data dependencies and data relationships. And that's some of the stuff that you lose with these frameworks, but you get all the modularity with the frameworks.
Well,
channel wires are not modular at all.
Well, I have to admit, I'm kind of an old curmudgeon and somewhat of a late adopter. Like, I did not adopt the auto tool for the longest time, mostly because the guy that I replaced when I started there was like, don't ever use the auto tool, always tab. And so I got used to tabbing everything. And
Norm likes to pick on me for being an auto tool kid.
Yeah. Yeah. And then like quick drop, I did not get that right away because I didn't know the names of everything. And so, but then once I figured out the names of a lot of the things I use regularly, I use it all the time now, and it's so much faster. And so,
yeah, and I started text-based programming, coming out of school.
Yeah.
So it's nice to actually be able to use the keyboard instead of having to navigate with the mouse.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like quick drop is definitely much faster when you know what you want. When you don't know what you want, when you're like, oh, I know there's a thing in the file palette that does this, but I don't remember the name. Mm-hmm. I find it quicker to browse usually.
Yeah, it took me a while. There were a handful of things that I knew what they were, and I wasn't really that interested in trying to min-max my time. But a couple of years ago, I made it a point to, if I didn't know what something was, I would make it a point to remember the name when I finally went and found it.
Well, initially, my argument against quick drop was like, my brain only works so fast. I don't need to code faster than I think. Like I see people coding, they're like super fast. I'm like, oh man, like I need time to process stuff. But what I found is that by using quick drop, I'm processing less, and that I'm not trying to remember where it is and everything, and like so I have more time to actually think about the problem.
Yeah, once you know what you're trying to write, I'm pretty fast if I know what I'm writing. I spend a lot of time designing as I'm coding, so I'm usually slow in that aspect. But once I figure out what I'm writing, quick drop just is a lifesaver.
So when it comes to design, are you a big TDD person, or do you like a little bit slightly more big design up front, or you like just try to follow design patterns? What's your philosophy?
I'm going to wait for Sam to throw something at me when I answer this.
Not yet. I talk about TDD, but in all honesty, I don't always do it. And
I have definitely gotten in the habit of writing some like manual test stuff. With the web server I was showing off, I had those little examples.
Yeah.
Those are my tests.
Yeah.
I use them both as documentation of how to configure and use a feature. And then that's also how I make sure that it does the thing it's supposed to by me just manually running it and making sure the result is correct. So it's a lot of the stuff I'm writing is just reusable libraries. So like with the web server, I'm writing to HTTP specifications. It's relatively easy to make sure you're doing what the specification says you should be doing. They're very detailed, very explicit. There's a lot there.
And the spec doesn't change, right? So if you've got it working and you don't ever plan on touching it or changing it.
Yeah. So I don't test the low level stuff. I do mostly higher level integration stuff. Some of the inner details I will write a couple of tests for some of the more complex things. But that's definitely one of the things I want to get into more. I want to start getting into more CI/CD and automated testing.
Yeah.
I've got enough packages on VIPM now and nested dependencies of the packages that trying to manage making updates and doing some of the testing and making sure things still work properly is it's definitely a large effort when you get a couple dozen packages out there.
That's interesting because with your like breadth of knowledge and like you're like constantly tinkering with stuff, I'm surprised you haven't done that yet.
Yeah, well, it's just a time thing. I've got so many things I like know how to write and that I want to write and use for my personal projects that I just haven't had time to set aside to really get into the continuous integration side of things.
Yeah, it's interesting. The continuous integration thing, like there's a barrier to entry to get it up, but once you get it up, it saves you so much time.
Yeah. And we're working on, NI's been focusing on that a lot the last couple of years, making it a little bit easier. Unfortunately, a lot of the information is coming from the community for the people that have figured it out.
Yeah.
But we're one of my things is working on trying to collate some of that information that's out there. And that'll probably be something I work on over the next year.
Yeah, I'm very much trying to figure out how to get all that to work together with Docker and maybe Vagrant and some other stuff. And like, I really want to get better at managing environments because I feel like that's a challenge.
Yeah, to this date, I still pretty much just have a single daily driver environment that I use, the 2020 SP1. It's kind of the minimum version for all the features I like to use, all the
Yep.
interfaces, have all the new collection stuff. So I pretty much just use that one. I don't have to do too much environment management outside of support. We're supporting customers. We need specific drivers.
So do you
and stuff
create
like that.
VMs then when you have a support call? Do you just fire one up and then install whatever
I have
drivers
a
they have?
couple on hand.
Ah.
So I usually have like a 2020 stack, a 2021 stack, 2022 stack. I think I haven't needed my 2019 stack in a while, so I don't think I have that ready to go right now. But and then we can load the driver sets we need into those.
So you guys use like Hyper-V or VMware or something?
Yeah, I use VMware.
Okay.
There's a couple people that use Hyper-V, but most of us use VMware.
Yeah, I used to use VMware. It works really well.
Yeah, it's just it's so nice for managing driver versions.
Yeah, VMware is nice and smooth and polished, and the virtual machines are like totally the way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I ran into somebody who had like multiple versions on the same machine the other day. I was like, don't do that. But
Darren has a VM that has LabVIEW version 6 all the way up to 2021.
Huh. Well, one time I was
he doesn't have any drivers or anything, but it all works.
Yeah, one time I was doing something with Fab, and I saw a machine that she had like a whole bunch of them on there too on the same machine. I was like, okay. And she's like, yeah, it works. I was like, oh, okay.
Anytime we get a customer that needs code updated from some really old version of LabVIEW, that's pretty much the virtual machine we use to, once you're that far back, you got to do, you got to open it in a couple of different versions to get it all the way updated.
Yeah. Well, what I remember is something about DAC-MX and like having issues. Like if you had 2 versions installed, you installed the newer version of DAC-MX, like you could only have one version of DAC-MX installed at a time. And sometimes that would cause problems and corruptions. And
Yeah, there's a lot of shared dependencies, and if you install a newer one, it'll install a newer shared dependency, which sometimes isn't always compatible. Yeah, dependency and version management is it's a challenge.
Yeah. So how do you handle that? Do you have any like special tips or tricks or?
I mean, for me, my stuff is I just always make sure everything is the latest version with everything else.
Yeah.
And then, documenting if you do need an older version, here are the other versions specifically that you would need with it. But it's just try to keep everything updated, work in the newest stuff.
So Christian, I was talking to not Christian Altenbach, the other one, Christian Butcher.
Mm-hmm.
And he was mentioning that he had something that I thought was very interesting. I haven't had time to try it out, but he had set up like a dummy NIPM package that installed basically nothing, but it depended on LabVIEW 2019 and DAC-MX for 20 whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And he used that so that then he could version control that, and then whenever he wanted to set up a new development machine, he just installed the package.
That's a cool idea. Yeah. There's actually a package out there for customers that need more restricted or work in more restricted environments and can't have the web servers or anything. There's a package that if you open up the control file and look at all the dependencies and conflicts and stuff, it conflicts with the existing web server implementation. So app web server, NL web server, all that, and then says that it provides those packages, even though it's got nothing in it. But it's one of those like pseudo packages that has no code in it. It just plays games with dependencies to trick NIPM and the rest of the things to thinking the dependencies are there, even though all the web servers get removed.
Well, Christian also had something going on like that with trying to set stuff up for Docker, because one of the issues with Docker is you can't reach hardware. Mm-hmm. You also can't install the NI DAC-MX drivers for whatever reason. I'm not entirely sure why. But if you want to do a build in a Docker machine and it calls DAC-MX, you need the DAC-MX VIs. So he had something that would basically he like created a package with the same name but a higher version number or something, and then it would install that instead. And then it would put the VIs in the right place. And of course the DLLs he just left out because...
So he built his own package that just had the library of VIs there?
Yeah, and I don't do a lot of DLL stuff, but apparently I guess if the DLLs aren't there, LabVIEW doesn't necessarily care when it's building because it expects them to be external anyway, so it just knows the path and it's happy.
And stuff like those DLLs are probably in system folders anyway.
Yeah, so whatever happens there, LabVIEW's happy to build your code because it's not including the DLL and it just has the wrapper VI and it's all good.
Yeah, no, that's I want to tinker with that now. I've had a couple of cases come in where there's been some issues with dependencies or specific versions or some specific feature of a library. There's nothing from stopping you from going into when you're doing a package builder and saying that you are an already existing package name. You just got to make sure the version numbers will work out that it gets used.
Yeah. Well,
Think of some tricks to pull with that.
Yeah. Well, I'm reminded. So I know you're doing your web server stuff. So I've been kind of into like cybersecurity for a while, and apparently there's been some issues lately with Python. I don't know if you're up on that with people package squatting or something. Like they find out.
Oh.
So somebody has like like Amazon has an internal Amazon package, and somebody else puts one on PyPy with the same name but a much higher version number. And when Amazon runs their build service or whatever, it says, "Oh, there's a newer version on PyPy," and it pulls it in.
Oh no!
Yeah. Apparently, there's like some way you can configure to only pull that from the local server, but like I guess that's not the default. So it finds
probably
the
why
latest
you
version.
should be, if you've written your code already, you should probably be locking in a specific version.
I wonder if that would be a bug with VIPM as well. I wonder if you had a local package in VIPM of a certain version and somebody happened to know the name of that package somehow and wrote the same one and somehow pushed it to VIPM.
I think there is a human that pushes a button to approve
to actually approve them on VIPM. So it might be hard to do that, but yeah. But that's something.
But VIPM doesn't automatically. I mean that would only be a factor when you are setting up a new environment. I think most people get. Well, you know what? I don't know what they do for the CI stuff, but.
So do you use VIPM much, or is that how you do reuse code, or how do you?
Yep. So I got in the habit starting about a year ago that anything reusable I write, I package up. Mm-hmm. You know, when Norm asked me for some silly little demo, I throw it in a package and throw it on VIPM.
Okay. So then do you put it on VIPM.io for everybody?
Yep.
Okay. Do you have any internal packages though that you use just for you that you don't publish? Because
nope.
Yeah, I have a bunch of stuff and like I publish some of it. Well, actually, I take that back. I have no problem giving some of it away, but I've never actually bothered to publish any of it on VIPM.io. So
yeah, I'm a little weird. Like I've got a full-time job. Yeah. I get paid, and I have no qualms about throwing what I make out there. It's certainly continuing to grow. For anybody that knows Matt Jacobson, who's an AE in NI, he likes to make the joke that it seems like my goal in any of the discussion forums we have is to be able to answer people's questions with a link to my GitHub, to some repository that does what we were already trying to figure out. I like code being out there. It's still going to be, there's going to be certain people that are able to leverage it. When you start getting into things like large web servers or more complex networking libraries, I think it's cool for it to be out there and have more options for people to use.
Yeah, in general, I'm not too shy about sharing my code, but there are certain things that I'm like, this is like, I don't know, my secret sauce or something. So.
I don't really have any secret sauce.
Yeah.
I get deep enough into some of the dark corners of LabVIEW that if I'm doing that stuff, that's not going to be packaged and that'll just live in a GitHub repository. I don't bother packaging that stuff up. But anything, if I'm making it a package so it's convenient for me to get it running on a new environment, I'm going to do that through VIPM.
Yeah. No, I do a lot of GitHub stuff. Not GitHub, GitLab is my preferred one, but I have a ton of repositories scattered across there, and most of them are open, and people can kind of go look at them. But most of them are not polished at all. It's like I had an idea, I tried it out, I got it working, got a proof of concept working enough for me.
I have a bad problem with not making minimum viable products. I either don't get it working at all and just let it collect dust, or if it's something that I'm using, I make sure it's polished enough that I'm either going to be packaging it up and releasing it, or it's like one step away from that level, and I just use it myself.
Yeah. Well, there's a big difference between getting something up to speed where you could use it yourself and then actually releasing it, because like the level of documentation and example code and all that, If you're just doing it for yourself and you're the only one who's going to use it, like, you don't necessarily need all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So-
that's about the one difference is the code itself will be polished.
Yeah, but all
But
the
then all
surrounding
the
stuff,
documentation, making the clean
making a good
icons, doing the
README, and
palettes for VIPM, that takes a lot of time. That's actually what I'm currently struggling with, trying to get everything updated to get this web server library published to VIPM. There's so much to document.
Yeah, so tell me more about your web server. Like, how is it different from like the NI web server or anything? Or like,
So NI web services or LabVIEW web services are great for pretty simple data communication. You want to send a command like start this action, or give me the latest data of what's happening, or give me this snapshot of data. So pretty simple data exchange. This is what I wrote is just a full web server. So it is alternative to web services when you need. So it has mechanisms and APIs and frameworks built in for authentication flows, and pretty much everything is extensible and replaceable. So if you wanted to not select what code to handle a request, instead of using the URL path, you could say everything was it's an API endpoint and everything comes in with JSON, and there's like a JSON identifier in there. You could have code that looks at that JSON identifier and uses that to decide what code to run. So it's super flexible, but it does everything. It is LabVIEW code, so it's not as efficient as by no means of something like Apache or
I was going to say,
Nginx.
so this is a replacement for Apache or Nginx written in
Yes,
LabVIEW?
yeah.
Okay.
If you need like 10 to hundreds of users and you're not going to be trying to scale to thousands or more of users, it's a pretty good fit for that. And I've got a couple of optimizations that I'm going to be doing to definitely make it scale to the hundreds of users pretty easily. But it's more flexible. It is a full back-end web server implementation. Borrowed a lot of ideas from Symfony PHP, which is a web framework I've used for other projects in the past, and liked the flexibility and kind of the frameworks that they had available for that. And I wanted to bring that to LabVIEW just because I like writing stuff in LabVIEW.
Cool. Yeah. I knew you were into PHP. Did you help with the G Central website or something?
I am. So if anybody is interested in web development, we are looking for help because I keep getting busy with other projects. And then we've got most of the new demo version of the new version of the website done. And it is worked on a whole new backend in PHP, doing MySQL databases. But basically, it's going to be a website with all the information for G Central, but also just the ability to register links to any LabVIEW code that's out there, whether it's on VIPM, NIPM, some random post useful post in a forum somewhere, or a LavaG forums,
or a blog
blog posts. So just a way to make LabVIEW code that exists out in the world somewhere, GitHub repos, GitLab repos, and just have it searchable in one place.
Cool. Kind of like Shodan for LabVIEW code or something.
I'm not familiar with Shodan.
Shodan's like this. It's kind of like Google, except that you searches like it basically indexes services that are available out there. So you can say, show me all the computers that have port 22 open.
Oh, okay.
So stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a little bit different from that, but yeah.
But yeah, just like, but is it actually going and finding this stuff, or people
no,
have
it
to
is not.
it?
You can use it to
so it's
register
not crawling
stuff.
anything. Okay.
It does crawl VIPM, so it automatically does update from that.
So it crawls the things it knows about.
Right.
Okay.
And some of the stuff we're going to work on is for things like GitLab or GitHub hosted stuff. We can do some more integrations with that. Set up a app account, developer account with GitHub, and then we can get some more information about that. Get the list of releases so we can list the release versions if a repository is listing release versions using tags, stuff like that. So you can do some kind of, specific version management for, all the benefits you get from source control. So we're working and planning on, higher level features like that for more extensive resources like that on GitHub, GitLab. But even if it's just a link or a zip that got attached to some forum post or a blog post, have the capability of registering that, tagging it. So if it's like networking code or it's architecture,
Okay, so then you can browse the tags.
so that then it becomes a much more searchable. Because trying to find some post that you saw 4 years ago in some Lava G
Oh yeah, no, I definitely
can sometimes be tricky to track back down if you didn't save the bookmark to it previously. So it's going to just kind of be like the bookmark for LabVIEW code that's out on the web.
Very cool.
Hey there, it's Taylor, producer of the LabVIEW Experiment podcast. Now through December 16th, we're running a survey to learn a little bit more about our listeners. We want to know who you are and what topics interest you so that we can make this show better. As a thank you for filling out the survey, we'll be randomly choosing 6 winners to receive a $50 Visa gift card. Find the link to the survey in our show notes or on our website, thelabviewexperiment.com. Thanks for listening, and now back to the show.
But yeah, so I am the head developer for that. We do PHP, JavaScript. So if anybody is interested in learning anything about any of those development or does that, we could certainly, use some more hands on it and get that pushed along.
Now that is version 2 of that website, correct? Because didn't Matthias create that original one in the LabVIEW? So what was the decision to switch over? Just more performance?
Just more performance. My web server didn't exist. My web server would not scale to the reach we expect. A resource like that to branch to. But it's just it's we're doing user accounts. We're going to be tracking ratings for code links. We're going to be setting up some automated behavior for, if you post to something like a GitHub repository, does it have a README? Does it have a license? Maybe automating running things through VI analyzer tests for some kind of, what's
quality
the word?
Control, right?
Yeah,
quality
just
rating,
like assigning a score, a quality score, an automated quality score to things, and just sort of having more of that flexibility in something that's meant to be a website running this kind of stuff. So, did an actual web language and
yeah. No, I mean, that all makes sense. Because part of it is, okay, I found this code that does X, but how trustworthy is it, right? How well written? Am I going to find bugs all over in it, or things like that? So having some sort of way to evaluate that is good.
Yeah. So we would like to automate that just to get some measure of it's at least not going to be terrible. You're not going to want to you're not going to need some eye bleach after you download some code and look at it.
Yeah, downloading some university students attempt to do something when he.
Yeah,
it's a bunch of spaghetti code.
Hopefully we can get them some more resources again. And
get some more training.
But yeah, so it's a pretty large project. We've had some involvement from G DevCon, found some volunteers for doing UX, UI design. So we actually had a designer that worked on the new layout.
Oh, that's right. Was that the intern or something?
It was. Everybody that's actually doing the website implementation, we're all volunteering.
No, but I thought Chris had some kid out of college that was doing that as an internship. Yeah. That's cool.
Yep. But then he got a job. I mean, the design is pretty much done. We would just have to, apply it to any new parts we make. But yeah, so got somebody that actually knows UX stuff and went to school for it. And it's not just me trying to throw some buttons and divs around.
I was going to say, LabVIEW developers are not known for their UI skills generally, except maybe Q.
I'd say I'm pretty decent at making some slick UIs in LabVIEW.
Cool.
I've certainly spent a lot of time trying to work on some, I've got libraries and frameworks out for doing more flexible UI stuff.
Well, I will have to look at that. I err much more on the side of very functional over aesthetic. So like the stuff that I do, like the colors and stuff might not be super aesthetic, but it's very functional. So
yeah, I'm not into like color theory or anything like that, but
it is amazing what Adobe Color Wheel does. Though. Like I've done some projects where like, I just use the basic LabVIEW controls, but I went and took the logo for the company and put it in the color wheel and came up with a couple colors, and like just adding those colors like made a huge difference.
So, being able to do stuff like this, mixing controls and indicators and things that look like arrays.
Yeah.
Being able to have dynamic contents for those and leverage all the OOP paradigms and everything.
Yeah, I need to get way better at that. I saw a framework recently. I think it was Matthias was showing me one that he had that, had basically, is all like nested subpanels, right? So you got like the subpanel and it's either horizontal or vertical, and then you can nest them and you can really break your stuff down. It was really nice.
One of my many side projects that's on the backlog is coming up with a layout engine similar to what you would get with Qt or web layout, grid layout based stuff, and accomplishing that with just here's a panel that has 200 subpanels in it that you can plug pieces into, and just working on all the glue logic for you in the background and doing all of the scalability and stuff. So that's probably going to be my next big thing after I get caught up on a few smaller things now that the web server's flying.
Yeah, I feel like doing good UIs in LabVIEW is totally possible. I've seen some amazing ones, but the barrier to entry, I think, is rather high. Like, it's not easy to do. It's very easy to throw up the gray controls and the modern controls or whatever, and but that's why I liked. Was it Hunter's presentation?
Hunter's presentation, and I mean, and even Q's, who's working on a lot of like some of the user experience side of it, and the layout and stuff like that. But yeah, Hunter had some awesome things to keep in mind while you're doing UI layout. I think some of that is, find somebody that is a UI pro and be able to tell you how you should be doing your UI, and then you can just follow their guidelines.
But there was some really good practical advice in there though too, even simple little things like just including units all the time. Like that just makes life so much easier. Yeah,
definitely. I was gonna send him some screenshots of some of the applications I've worked on in the past. 3/4 of them had units in them, and I was proud of that. But I don't think I wouldn't have been given permission to share those. But then a couple of them, I was like, oh yeah, this definitely would have been nicer with units and some of the other captions and labels.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, that's very interesting. Yeah, there's like a psychology to how users use stuff too, which I find rather interesting. Like just the way you group things and how people's brains work. And
I've worked on some decently sized control applications in the past, where there's a lot of it's high pressure testing. There's a lot of valves, so figuring out how to group stuff. So that one of the things I focused on in when I was working for that company was, minimizing the amount of time it took somebody to figure out where in the layout they need to be, and so using tricks like coloring and grouping and it's a fun puzzle when you have the time to get to that aspect of it. It's fun. It's just unfortunately we usually don't have time to worry about those details.
Yeah. Well, one of the mistakes I see people make is when they inherit a project and they decide to either rewrite it or refactor, whether they stick with the current UI. And I think that's like a great opportunity to change things. And so,
I mean, it can be tricky. Even if it is a bad UI, people can be used to it. And even if the new UI is fantastic and a new person would love it, if you're rewriting something, it's probably already used by a team of people.
Well, so yeah, my example actually was only used by like 2 or 3 people, so it makes more sense. But I had this application. It wasn't using testing, but it had several stations that were working, and the developer had put like all the motors on the motor tab and all the valves on the valve tab. But like when you were when you really cared about the station,
were they in between?
Yeah. So basically, and there's value in having a hardware tab or something that is just all the hardware stuff listed like that. That's great for like testing and troubleshooting and stuff like that. But when you're operating it, you care about what's going on in this particular station. So you want to see the station. You want to see where the motor position is on the station, in addition to the LEDs that are the indicate the stops, and you want to see the distances and everything there. And just moving that around, because I mean, I was watching them and they're like, oh, Yeah, to start, you click on this tab and you set this thing, and then you click on this tab and you set this. And you got to remember to go over here and disable this. And like there's like 5 steps to press go to run. And then when you wanted to see what was going on, well, oh, you look at this on this stage, but if you want to see what the motor's doing, you got to go over here. And
that sounds like some
really
very early on in my LabVIEW career. Some of my first projects were we got contracted to do a LabVIEW re-implementation of some old PLC systems. And they're, pretty low resolution dot matrix LCD displays. So they have to split stuff up across multiple pages. Yeah. And people were continually running tests against closed valves and not even realizing it because they're just looking at the pump control page with the pressure readout. And they're pressurizing and it's holding, but they had the valve closed the whole time because they had to go to another valve to page. So, making UIs where, and maybe it can get busier, but everything's available without having to flip around places.
Yeah, all the important stuff is, or something like Counter was saying about like layering or something. Mm-hmm. But one of the craziest projects I had, we replaced a system that was a bunch of literal switches and a strip chart recorder.
Yep.
And it was like, that was interesting.
It was interesting seeing some of that still in use. So, I'm relatively young, and computers were certainly a thing for me growing up. So seeing stuff like strip charts and the wheel charts still in use to this day in some places that had some newer aspects and technology in use. It's just, it was neat seeing that, but it was also very nice to get rid of it.
Well, I've seen that, and this was like when I worked at Westinghouse. This was probably like 10 years ago, but I saw a lot of environmental chambers for some reason. They all like those little wheel charts and strip charts.
They've already got all the processes set up for tracking all of that and, managing their file cabinets of test logs. It's nice when you can throw it on some servers on your company network and not have to have a physical file cabinet somewhere you got to go to find that stuff again.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of efficiency to be gained by digitizing some of that stuff. Like we had one project we worked on where like the engineer had like all this data. So they weren't using strip charts, but they had like 3 or 4 separate data recorders that didn't talk to each other, all just separate instruments. And the guy would go around with the USB stick and grab them all. And then you have to put them in Excel. But he couldn't put them all in one file. So he'd have to go in and manually decimate them and then put them all in one Excel file. And it took him like weeks to turn out reports.
That's ripe for getting some tooling and software set up to automate that.
Yeah. Cool.
That's rough. I couldn't imagine ever having to do that. I'm glad I grew up in the computer age.
Yeah, you're about my age, aren't you?
I'm 36.
Okay, yeah, we're pretty close. I'm like 39, so yeah, our generation is interesting. I heard somebody talk about that, like when we grew up, technology was there, so we know it and we're comfortable with it, but it wasn't pervasive. Mm-hmm. So if you were born a few years before us, you were already like in your 20s or whatever when technology came along, and so versus if you're born after us, a few years after us, like you just grew up with it and it was everywhere. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of like bridge that world.
But more and more, they're increasing the barrier to entry because there's so much automation and things are so tightly integrated these days that it's until you get to a certain age, it feels like there's less exposure to what actually goes into making all of that work.
You're a user. Yeah. You're exposed to using cell phones and stuff early on, but you're not exposed to the programming.
Yeah.
I had this conversation with Jim Crane. We were talking about CI/CD stuff, which you had mentioned earlier, but just like the number and web stuff is the same way. Like if you're writing a web application, you need to know about the DOM and the browser and cores and JavaScript, and then you got to know about the backend. You got to know how all the TCP/IP works, and like there's just so much to learn. And like continuous integration, the same thing. Like, and it's really hard to just learn one of those things because they all interact. Mm-hmm. So.
Yep. Yeah, I can tell you how many times I had like 30, 40, 50 tabs open on OWASP and a whole MDM, the Mozilla Developer Network, while I was working on that web server. It's a very big rabbit hole. And that's why some things still aren't working and finished, like caching, because some of that is just super tricky.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, then you add the security side onto it of like being able to, or having an understanding of what people are doing. And then also add to that the fact that it's no wonder there's security holes when there's so many moving parts that have to all talk to each other.
I'm surprised computers and the web work at all.
Yeah.
It is mind-boggling.
Well, if you study the security stuff, like some of the stuff is just super easy to break.
Yeah.
And like,
so speaking of that and experimenting, you offered to do some abuse of my web server. One of these days I'll get a public accessible web server running. I'll have to send you that information, see if you can see what you can do against it.
Yeah, I would like to try that. I signed up for HackerOne actually, but I haven't actually.
Is that like a course for?
HackerOne is like I don't know what you would call it, security collective. So basically, it's crowdsourced vulnerability testing. So basically, you go on there, like Google and Facebook or whatever offer bug bounty programs. A lot of companies that aren't that big, they run it through HackerOne. So you go on there and you sign up for a program to go vulnerability test a specific website. And then they give you a bunch of parameters. They say you're allowed to test these things and look for these types of vulnerabilities. And then you go look, and if you find one, they pay you. I haven't actually made any money on it. I haven't actually done anything other than they have a couple of tutorials that I went through. But it's interesting.
I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, apparently you can make a lot of money doing it because there's some guy in Brazil who made like several $1 million doing it. Some high school kid.
Yeah, I'd imagine you'd have to know a fair bit though and know the exploit. I do not. Well, I rely on OWASP to tell me what things I should be mitigating against.
Yes, but I think you're in I feel like large major companies probably do that very well, but there's a lot of smaller companies out there running servers and stuff that probably are not even aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
And
a lot of stuff gets tends to get ignored when you get to the luxury of hiding behind a firewall. But then a lot of the larger companies still have IT teams that actively probe. I know when I was testing my web server for the summer LabVIEW project we're running, I could see logs of some of the automated tooling that IT runs trying to figure out if there were vulnerabilities. I could see all the requests it was making, trying to see if it was some insecure web app or something.
Yeah.
I never got any emails or calls, so I think I'm doing good. Okay. I think I'm okay so far.
Well, lots of, I feel like LabVIEW programmers, we generally aren't concerned very much about security. Like we probably should be. And I think part of it is like you're behind the company firewall, everything's fine. But with this whole zero trust idea now of instead of trying to keep people out with the firewalls and stuff, you still do that, but you assume that somebody somewhere is going to figure out a way through.
Mm-hmm.
Or some malicious actor internal to your company might have something. So how do you protect against that?
But even the way, the cloud gets leveraged these days and all the systems are getting interconnected, there's so many opportunities for cracks to show up.
Yeah. But the stuff we do is super dangerous too. Because we control like big valves and pumps and motors and generators. And there's a lot of potential there if somebody wanted to wreak havoc.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that is, is LabVIEW is maturing and getting more features like SSL and TLS support.
Yes,
and
that is
that's
great.
A first-class feature these days. It turns out it's actually super easy to integrate. I wrote my web server. It was just HTTP at first. I think it took me 20 minutes, 30 minutes to integrate TLS into it.
Yeah, I was going to say, you kind of need that nowadays. It's like a non-starter until
but
HTTP.
Just, starting to encourage the practice of using that for everything.
Yeah.
Like, you've just got your HMI talking to your CREO. You should probably do that over TLS.
Yeah.
And just starting to push for those kinds of recommendations.
No, I think that's huge. Yeah, just making people aware of what can go wrong. There was a CLA summit where they did security stuff. You probably weren't around then, or were you?
No, I think it was CLA Summit 2017 was the first one I went to.
Okay. Yeah, it was actually very interesting, a bunch of the security stuff that they talked about. And I don't know if any of those are available on the wiki or not, but it'd be interesting to go look at it.
Yeah, it'll be. I'll have to take a look and see what the current recommendations are. And now that we're getting some of these new features, what are the new ones that should be made?
The other thing I thought that was interesting too was Derrick Bommarito was talking about, and he seemed to have it figured out. But Derrick's also a very bright guy, and I asked him, I was like, "Oh yeah, it's trivial," and I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, trivial to you, but not to me." But was PPLs and stuff?
Just do it a couple of times; it'll be easy.
Well, part of it was plugins and PPLs, and actually signing them. With keys and actually verifying them.
Oh, okay.
Which, I mean, I understand. I know what it is. I understand the theory, but actually implementing that in LabVIEW, I probably wouldn't know where to start.
Mm-hmm.
I think he said something about I guess there's a .NET utility that does it or something. But
I'd imagine it's probably a combination of hashing the file and storing some
Yeah.
signature inside.
Yeah, and then you just
accessible.
verify. Yeah, but yeah, you have to set up the certificates and everything, and yeah. But I do think it's interesting. Like if you have a plugin thing, you just drop whatever you want in that folder and all of a sudden it runs. Well, that could easily be a security risk depending on what's going on. But anyway, it is about time. I could continue this conversation for quite a while. But thanks for coming to G DevCon NA. Thanks for presenting.
Yeah, thanks for putting on such an awesome event. This week was awesome.
Very cool. Yeah. All right. Well, I will talk to you later. Thank you very much.
Yep. Have a good one, Sam.
All right.
Thank you.
That's it for today's episode of the LabVIEW Experiment. Thanks for listening. If you have any comments or questions, head over to thelabviewexperiment.com and drop me a note. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at the LV Experiment so you never miss an episode. And remember, small steps and quick feedback are all you need. Catch you next time. Cool. That went well. We had a variety of topics.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's never know it. Life is like a box of chocolates.
No, I mean, I was talking to Jimmy. He was talking about like the goal of the podcast and stuff and expanding our practices and stuff.